Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Working. My name is David Kimmelman, and Working is the podcast that is bringing you authentic, unapologetic, and honest feedback about careers, guiding you through job searches and networking, and also bringing to you relevant points about employers, how employers look at candidates and applicants for jobs. And also, we're going to be bringing information and guidance to companies on how they do things like workforce planning and engagement with their people and building workforce cultures. So thank you for joining me today. Today, it's just going to be you and me, no guests today. And I really wanted to take you all through kind of the job search process and start with talking to people that are currently unemployed. So if you are out there looking for a job, you've lost your job potentially through a reduction in force in your company, whether it was a large reduction in force or a small one, but you lost your job there. Whether you were terminated for cause, there were performance reasons, or maybe you're just working at an employer and you're not happy with your current work environment and you're looking for a change. So how do you start, right? Where do you get started? So first, there are a lot of people out there today that are or that have been out of work for a long time. It's a really challenging job market today. There are more people than there are jobs. Now, there are still jobs out there to get, but how you get them, what is your course of action? What are you doing to separate yourself from the pack? What are you doing to present yourself as a unique applicant for prospective employers? So let's talk a little bit about, how you get started. So, first and foremost, let's say you've lost your job, or let's say you've been on the job market for a while. I'm going to recommend you just stop for a moment and take a breath, okay? Because when you first lose your job, again, no matter how it happens, but when you lose your job, your first instinct typically is, okay, I got to get a new job. So I have to update my resume, and I have to start just applying to jobs, and I've got to get something. I've got a family to take care of. I've got all of these things come into your head. And it's not wrong. I totally understand it, and I've been there before. But what you have to do is you have to take this step backwards first, right? And you've got to plan your course of action, because make no mistake about it, that looking for a job is a project. And it's one of the most important projects that you're ever going to have in your life at most times, because you've got to put together the plan. What kind of job do I want to get? How am I going to attack it? What do I need to do with my resume? How do I want to send my resume out? Do I apply for every job that I find that might be right for me? So you got to put all these thoughts together. But the first thing you need to do when you lose a job is you need to take a step back, and you need to take a breath, and you need to process what just happened to you. Because when you lose a job, it's a loss, like any loss that you might have. And part of that process is, number one, coming to terms with the fact that you have lost your job. And one of the reactions that a lot of people have when they lose their job is they immediately just start blaming their company. They have bad things to say about their company, that's not everybody, But a lot of people will feel that way because it might have been unexpected. You did not expect to lose your job, and now all of a sudden you're on the street. You want to think about, okay, was there anything I could have done over the course of my time at that employer that I could have done better in my job? Or were there things that I could have done that would have made me somebody that my employer, couldn't do without? So you really need to take a look at that and think to yourself, what could I have done differently? Is there anything I could have done differently? And really have that kind of self-assessment before you just start jumping into, I got to go find another job. So if you can, take that first bit of time, a couple of days, few days, just to kind of really process it and understand just what happened and why it might have happened. Then you want to start the process of thinking about, okay, what's my next step? And while there can be a sense of desperation in having to find another job, when you're let go of a position, it might offer you an opportunity to kind of say, was I really happy with what I was doing? Do I want to continue on this path? And if you do, great. But is there something else I would rather do? Is there something else I've wanted to do? Or is there another kind of industry, another kind of company that I wanted to be a part of? I've been working for these big companies. I really would love to go to something smaller, that's much more team-oriented. Whatever that thing might be, or those things might be, start thinking about that and start making lists. So once you've again gone through this you've processed what's going on, start to make a list. Make a couple of different columns for yourself of what are my greatest strengths, from a work perspective. What do I do really well? Am I incredibly detail oriented? I've got a great work ethic. I've got great technical skills. And whatever those technical skills are, and when I say technical skills, we are talking about the technical skills of any job that you perform. So if you're in marketing, what are the technical aspects of the work that you do? What are the specifics of the details of the job that you do? And that's the same. It could be marketing. It could be sales. It could be a software engineer. It could be a customer support person. It could be HR. Anything that you do, there's technical components of the job that you kind of want to write down. What are my greatest strengths from a work perspective? Then make a column right next to that talk about your own personal assets, right? So what are you like? Are you an easy person to talk to? Are you self-aware? Are you vocal about, you see something and you want to offer an opinion? You want to be that team player that is not coming across that everything, but you're listening and you're taking things in and you understand, you have an idea of doing something maybe a little differently than has been done before. So are you that kind of an individual? Just any of those kinds of personal assets that you bring to an employer. Make that list, write all of that down next to, all of those technical skills you possess. Then make a list of what's important to you about the employer that you work for. So that could be everything from culture. What's the culture of the organization? What are the values of the organization? What are the benefits that they offer? Some of those things you'll find on somebody's website. And if not, these are the kinds of things that ultimately, as we go further down the road, you're going to include in your questions that you want to ask of an employer. So look at that, what the kind of employer you want to work for, including, maybe next to that, you're writing down the kind of industries that you want to be in. Do you want to be in nonprofit? Do you want to be in healthcare? Do you want to be in, it could be in healthcare, it could be in health tech. Do you want to be in the education technology space or education? Do you want to work for the government? Do you want to work in high tech, biotech? Think about those things that mean something to you. And also the size of the company. Do you want to work for a large company? Are you somebody that needs to go to a place where there's significant structure in place, right? There's process for everything. There's procedures. Everything is very well structured. Is that a kind of place that you're going to thrive in? Or do you want to be in a place that, well, maybe they have a little bit of that, and you want to be a part of growing that and evolving that? Or do you want to go into a startup environment that has next to no, process and policies, and you really want to help create that from the ground up? These are the things you need to assess about yourself. So what are those places that you want to work in? And really identify for you personally, what does that look like? And what does it mean to you? And you need to start doing that before you ever start applying for a job. Because the more granular yet still agile in your approach that you are to helping figure out what does that next step look like to you, that's going to help you immensely in targeting specific employers, creating like kind of unique brand for yourself that is going to help you identify for yourself and promote for yourself through your resume, through your LinkedIn page, that this is who I am. This is what I bring to an employer. And then hopefully that's going to help people find you, as well as help you find those kinds of employers that you want to apply for jobs at those places. The other thing that it comes down to also is when you're applying for jobs. Now, there's the thought of, I want to apply for a job where it might stretch me a little bit, which is okay. But the real important thing there is that you have to have a decent amount of core competencies that match up to what the job entails, and then have maybe 2 or 3 things that are really going to maybe stretch you a little bit, and maybe you've been exposed to, you've been involved in it for a little bit, but you're not an expert. So you want to have that really good balance of those core competencies, those core set of skills on the technical side of the job, and then have 2 or 3 of those kind of stretch goals for yourself. So before you ever start applying for these jobs, that's what you got to figure out. And that's what's going to help make you more attractive to prospective employers, right? The other thing that I want to mention to you on this note of applying for jobs, and I really want you all to take note of this: never apply for a job from a job board, okay? So let me say that again. Never apply for a job directly from a job board. Now, some of you might be thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Don't apply from a job board. What I'm talking about is a job board. I don't care if it's LinkedIn, Indeed, any other, number, ZipRecruiter, any other boards that are out there. Let those job boards be a search tool for you to find prospective opportunities, right? And jobs you might be interested in. But after you find that job, right, go to the website of the employer, right? Go and research that employer on their website. Look at what they do. Look at do they have a really built out career site that really tries to show off who they are as an employer, what the work-life culture is like there? You really want to look and see what all that is about. Then you want to look at their business. You want to look and see what business are they in? How do they conduct their business? Who are some of their clients or customers? Really do that level of research. And while you're doing it, if you're really doing your research properly, you're going to come up with things. You're going to look at something that might trigger a question. Write that question down, okay? And we're going to get to the interview part of things a little bit later. But taking notes of what you're seeing on somebody's website that prompt questions for you is going to be a vital part of your interview process, okay? So just keep that in the back of your head for right now. So now you're going to go through that research. And, if it's a company that's been around for a while, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, whatever, they're probably going to have some executive bios on there, management bios, a lot of startups over the past several years, depending upon how big they are. If they're 20 people or so, they might put everybody on their website and you get to see who everybody is. But really look at that. And then also go back onto LinkedIn if you hadn't been there already, but go and look up the company on LinkedIn. Find out a little bit more about them. Look at the people that are in the company, and do you have any connections to the people that are in that organization? Now remember, you are doing all of this before you ever are applying to a job, okay? So now you're looking at all the people that are there. And depending upon what you do, the kind of work you do, the role you're in, try and find who might be a leader of that department, either on LinkedIn or possibly on their website. Look at their bios, look at their LinkedIn pages. And here's going to be something that might sound kind of crazy to you. I'm going to tell you a story or two in just a minute. But look for any emotional or professional connection you might have to an individual. I don't care if it's someone that would be in your department. So if you're a marketing person and you're looking at a chief marketing officer's bio, and there's something that ties the two of you together, that might be someone you want to reach out to and leverage that professional or emotional connection. Okay, so let me pause for a minute and give you an idea of what I mean by an emotional connection. So many years ago, I was not overly active. I wasn't overly active in looking for an opportunity, and I was living in Massachusetts at the time. And I found this company that was an HR technology company, and it was really of interest to me. And so I went and I started reading all the bios of the CEO and so on. I didn't get quite through the CEO, or I got through the CEO and didn't move on further, because when I was reading the CEO's bio, I saw that they rode crew in college. And based on things that they were talking about, it looked like they were still very actively following, crew in that sport. So he rode crew at his college. So thought came right into my head that my brother-in-law at the time was a very well-known NCAA Division I women's crew coach, and today he's one of the best known, if not the best, women's crew coach in the United States. And since he wrote Crew, I decided to write this CEO a note. And in my note, I started off saying, I think if I remember correctly, his name was Cliff. And I said, "Hi, Cliff. I was just reviewing your company and reading your bio and noticed that you wrote Crew in college. And from what I gathered from reading about you, it looks like, you might still follow the sport. And I was just curious if you do, because my brother-in-law is blah, 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 blah. And he's the head coach of the UCal women's crew team. And, I just thought it was an interesting connection that we had. As for the professional reason for my contacting you is I'm very interested in your company and the prospect of maybe joining your organization if something might be around, and however else I phrase it." So I go off and I send him that LinkedIn message. It wasn't 30 minutes later that I get a response from him. And he said, "Hi, David, thanks for reaching out to me. Really appreciate your note. Yes, I do still follow Crew. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that your brother-in-law just hired my niece as his assistant coach at UCal on their crew team." Okay, what are the odds? I would have had no clue about that, but that immediately connected the two of us. And he said, I'm going to forward your note and your email address to my senior VP of HR here and have him get in touch with you and so on. So that got me that connection. Funny story is, yes, my brother-in-law at the time, now my former brother-in-law, he did end up hiring that CEO's niece, and about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years later, ended up marrying her. So, I mean, it's just one of those crazy stories, but you never know where something's going to lead. And, like the old saying goes, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So when you're out there looking for an opportunity, don't forego that level of research in trying to find some kind of connection, whether it's a professional connection, maybe you have people that you know from previous companies, or however that works. Use that in trying to connect with someone. It doesn't have to be the CEO. It could be anybody. And if it's at a senior level, a director, a VP, a CXO, anyone like that, use that, okay? Now, let's go on the other side of this, but also similar. Let's say you're looking to get into an industry that you have had a passion for many years, but work-wise, you don't have any experience in it. You've never worked for a specific kind of organization, but you're fascinated by what they do. You have a real passion for it, and you want to find your way in. Again, through your research, try and find some creative way to write something that would draw attention to yourself from somebody in a hiring position. Okay? So let me just share with you another really brief story here. So I was actually laid off in the summer of 2001, actually laid myself off. I was the VP of HR for a startup company for about 3 years. And it was, at the peak of the dot-com boom back in the mid to late 90s, 1990s. And the dot-com bust really started in 2001. And I was unfortunately part of the executive team, and I led the kind of orchestration and coordination of having to lay off a whole lot of people over the course of 6 months. We went from like 75 people to 11 people. So I ended up laying myself off in the summer of 2001. And, I had no way of knowing that what was going to happen on 9/11 of 2001. And I had taken several weeks off to just kind of refresh myself. And I have a great network. I didn't think it was going to be any challenge for me to find another opportunity. And right after 9/11 hit, nobody was hiring, especially nobody in HR was hiring. People in marketing weren't, no one was hiring for marketing and all kinds of different stuff. It was just a horrible time for obviously the country. And the job market just steamrolled out of control after that. I ended up being out of work for about 10 months, out of full-time work. I did some very minor consulting work that did not really pay a lot of the bills. I ended up having to deplete my IRA savings and everything. I had a young family at home, 3 kids, and so on. So that was a really difficult time. And now I was constantly networking and constantly trying to figure out, what I was going to do, or doing different things and talking to people all the time. And then, again, another crazy story, but I've been a big sports fan for many years. I grew up in New York. Lived in Massachusetts for, about 28 years or so as an adult. But still a New Yorker, always will be a New Yorker at heart, and a big sports fan of New York teams. And in 2001, towards the end of 2001, the Boston Red Sox were purchased by this guy, John Henry, and he was building a whole new organization. I was living in Boston, and I was reading about this all the time and seeing what they were doing. Now, I'm a New York Yankees fan. Like I said, I grew up in New York and never was a Boston Red Sox fan, ever. However, these guys were kind of trying to reestablish and build a winning infrastructure for the entire organization. And so it was, I think it was like February or March, it was March, I think, of 2002. And I said, I wonder if, they're going to be changing things organizationally, and maybe they could use a VP of HR or somebody new with a fresh approach. And it would be all about building a winning culture from the ground up, from the front office to the field, everything. So I find the front office phone number for the Red Sox, and the president of the Red Sox, his name is Larry Lucchino. So I called the number and I said, someone answered, and they said, Boston Red Sox. And I just said, Larry Lucchino, please. And they said, hold on. And they transfer me, and I get somebody else to say Larry Lucchino's office. And I said, yes, can I speak with Larry Lucchino, please? This is David Kimmelman. Like I knew him, right? We've known each other forever. And his admin says, Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lucchino is not here in the office. He's actually down at spring training in Florida. If you'd like, I could give you the number down there. Yeah, please. Can I get that number? And so she gives me the number. I hang up. I call the number she gave me down in Florida for spring training, and voice picks up on the other side and says, Larry Lucchino. I just about fell out of my chair. I like, oh my God. Oh, okay, I'm on. And I said, Mr. Lucchino, my name is David Kimmelman. I've been working in HR for quite some time now. And I live in Boston, and I've been following everything that, you and John Henry have been doing for the organization. And I get this feeling that, you're not just trying to build a winning baseball team, but you're trying to build a winning culture for the entire organization. And as someone who has worked in startup companies and loves bringing a fresh, innovative approach to how you do, not just HR, but all the aspects of HR, of employee engagement and bringing in great talent to the organization and so on, I would love to talk to you about maybe being a part of your organization and helping you build that from the back office, all the way out to the field. And he's like, well, that's a really interesting concept, and I really appreciate what you're saying there. And he started asking me some questions about what I've done, how I've done it, and so on and so forth. And we ended up talking for about 10, 15 minutes on the phone. And he said, David, right now I'm really focused on getting the team up and running over the next few weeks, and getting us through spring training and then getting us out to start the season in April. Why don't we do this? Can you send me your resume, and how about, why don't you call my office in like 3 weeks? And I said, well, is there a good time or a good date for me to, when you're back, that I can, make sure I try to get in touch with you? And he gave me that, and I said, fantastic, and thank you so much for talking with me, and I wish you the very best of success, with the team. Great conversation. So a few weeks go by. I follow up as we had talked about. I had already sent my resume, and he said, we've been going through everything. I don't think we're going to make any changes right now. He said, but that's not to say it won't happen at some point. But let's, just, if you want to keep tabs on us and, and stay in touch and send me messages every now and then, every few months or so to check in, that's perfectly okay, and so on. Bottom line, nothing happened. I didn't get to go to work for the Boston Red Sox. But again, I took a shot. And I did something really outside the box, and I got someone's attention. So if you take nothing else away from this specific podcast, I want you to think about how you can do things differently. The Apple tagline for many, many years has been think different. That's what I want you to do. I want you to think different. Think big. All right. Now, just be careful. When I say think big, if you've worked in customer support for the past 10 years, and you might be, let's say you're a customer support manager, that doesn't mean you should be going and applying for a director of marketing position, right? You got to be smart. You got to be thoughtful. Going back to what I said before about, have those core competencies, those core skill sets that can match to a job, but there might be some stretching too, right? But take some chances. And, the other part of it is don't let anybody piss on your dream or your passion. if you're talking to somebody and you say, I really want to do this, then go and try and do it, right? Go make it happen for yourself. And if you get somebody who's been a naysayer, oh, well, why, you're not going to get that. Why would they talk to you? Or this isn't going to happen, or this is going to be really hard. Okay, well, if it's not hard, if everything was easy, everybody would do it and everybody would be employed. So, really, really think about that stuff. I hope those couple of stories resonated with some of you and it helps. So let's go back to where you're now applying, right? You've done all of this research. You've looked at bios. You're trying to find some inroad into the organization. If you can send a LinkedIn message, if you're not able for whatever the reason to send something through LinkedIn, think about what the email that this person might have. So let's say, the name of the company is the Jones Company, right? And you want to contact John Smith at the Jones Company, right? And you can try and send an email, right? You can write an email to like multiple email addresses and try and reach out to them. So you could say, John's, full all written out, John Smith at jonescompany.com. Could be John.Smith. You could do J Smith, but try multiple different ways of writing an email to get to them. And you can attach your resume. You can write a brief story about why you're contacting them and really try and grab their interest. Is this going to work every time? Nope. But if it works 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 that you've targeted, then hey, maybe that's the ticket. If you're just sending, 50, 100, 200, 300. I know people that have sent like 300 resumes. I see these stories on LinkedIn all the time. Say, I've sent 300 resumes. I've had like 2 interviews and I haven't gotten anything. But that's not a productive way to find a job. I know it might sound counterintuitive to people, where you're thinking, well, the more jobs that I apply for, the more likelihood that, one of them is going to hit. Well, I feel like the more targeted you are, the more of a likelihood that you're going to connect with someone. You're going to connect with a job. You're going to connect with a company where it's going to come to fruition. So more is not always right. Okay. It's not always the best way to go. So you've done that. You figured that out. You're trying to make connections. You're trying to see if you have any direct connections or even second degree connections. So let's say you're trying to apply to a company and on LinkedIn, you see that you're a second degree connection from the director of marketing, just for argument's sake. And then you see, oh, wow, David is a first degree connection. They're connected, and I know David pretty well. So what do? You reach out to David and you say, hey, David, it's John. Haven't talked to you in a while. Good to reconnect. Hey, I'm looking for a new position, and I found this job. I found this company, and it looks like you are connected to this guy named Bill Johnson. Do you know Bill well? And might you be able to help connect me with Bill or put in a good word for me? I'd really appreciate any help, that you might be able to lend. Now, if Bill calls you back, or whoever your friend, or if David, I'm sorry. So if David calls you back and says, hey, or writes you back and says, hey, yep, I know Bill really well. Let me reach out to him and let him know that I know you. And, hopefully that's something that can help. That kind of networking is really critical. And people are more likely to give you an opportunity to speak with them or interview with them than they are by just being one of 100 or 500 or 1,000 resumes. That is the truth of the job market, especially today, where we are getting an incoming, an influx of anywhere from 300 to 1,000 resumes for a job, and that is real. Okay, that is the realistic truth about this job market. So you can be one of 500, or you can try and set yourself apart through networking or being really creative and innovative in how you message a prospective employer that you're interested in. So that is one way to look at all of that, right? So let's say you get the interview, right? You get a chance to interview. Now, here's the tricky thing. There's a lot of recruiters out there today that are mostly box checkers. There's a lot of box checkers out there. There's also some really good recruiters out there that will take the time to really interview you and talk to you about your experience, about what your capabilities are, about who you are. So there are recruiters out there that will see you, right? But I would say the majority today are box checkers, are just saying, okay, do they meet this criteria? Do they meet this criteria? And then, okay, I'm going to put this forward and see if people want to talk to them further. So here's the trap not to fall in, right? Even though we know that to be true, we want to play a different expectation, right? We want to go in expecting that they're really going to want to know about you. They're going to want to learn about you. So you have to be really ready to listen to their questions and answer their questions directly, honestly, and authentically. Talked a lot about authenticity in a couple of previous podcasts, but you really do want to be authentic. So really and truly listen to the questions. And if somebody asks you, what are you looking for in your next job? Don't just give some stock answer of, well, I'm looking for a job that's really going to leverage my expertise and help me do this. And I want to be in a company that's got a great culture and has great benefits. And, that's what everybody says. Okay. You want to turn it into something different. So what I'm looking for, let me share with you that I've done a lot of research on your company, and I've made a list of target companies, and yours is one of them. And so as I've gone through your website and I've read up on what you do, the kind of customers you do, what your commitments are, the values, and what appears to be the culture from what I read on the website, you all bring to employees something that's really important to me, and this is what I've learned from my research. This is the kind of organization I want to be a part of. And in this role, whatever that role is, I feel like I can take my experiences, and I'm happy to share with you specifics about the experience that I have and how it relates directly to things that you put on your job description and what I've read on the website. This is what I'm looking for, right? So just don't give a stock answer. Don't go overboard with your answer and talk for 5 minutes, but get out there that you've done your homework, you've done your research. Because I'm going to tell you, the majority of people they're going to talk to have not done that and have not prepared really good answers. And as someone who interviews people regularly for so many years and still today, it drives me crazy when I go to certain lengths to tell people, I'm really interested in learning about you and what you are looking for. What is really important to you? What is the kind of job and kind of organization that you feel you're going to really thrive in, right? And I get stock answers, I would say 90+% of the time. And I want more for you, right? So really think about that. Think about what that job means to you, what the organization means to you. Do your research and be prepared to give a good answer. The other thing about interviewing that is also really important, the questions that you ask of an interviewer, and I don't care if it's a recruiter or if it's the direct hiring manager, or you're interviewing with a panel, you have to come up with some really good questions where they're going to say, wow, that was a really good question. Because people are typically asking softball questions, right? They're asking, so what is the culture like? I'm looking for work-life balance. What is work-life balance like? Now, I'm not saying those things aren't important. And those are things that you should ask as part of the interview process. However, make sure you're interested in the business. You're interested in the opportunity to be impactful to their business, and think about those questions. And that's why I said earlier, as you're doing your research, write down things that you're seeing of real interest in, about the company. So let's say they have a big annual conference that attracts thousands of people to come and see them. You might want to craft, some kind of question of, about that conference, right? And say, so I was reading up on the annual conference that you all do, and I'm really curious about, what draws people to it on an annual basis. So what is the organization doing as part of its growth and evolution that makes people want to keep coming back every year to be a part of that conference? Again, that's just something off the top of my head about one thing, but you can also ask technical questions about, if it's marketing, and talk about the tools that they're using in marketing. Ask questions about, when you get to the hiring managers, or even a recruiter, you can ask them, so, what are the expectations of me coming in there in my first 90 days and even in my first year? What would be expected of me to have my manager and the organization see me as someone that's having a big positive impact, on the team and on the company? So again, don't just ask softball questions. Really dig in and ask some important questions about the organization. That's going to be really important about the interview. The last thing that I really want to go into today, and look, we've got more podcasts coming where I'll have more guests, and we're going to talk more in depth about things around the resume and so on. But one last thing that I want to talk about, and I'm also going to go into much greater depth in future podcast episodes as well, is about networking. And we've already touched on that. But what I want to say to you, especially about networking, some of you may think that, I don't have much of a network. And if that is in your mind, if you have said that to yourself, either out loud or you've said it to others, you've just said it in your internal voice. That is not true. Okay. Now, have you been cultivating and building your professional network over a long period of time in a very purposeful manner? Maybe you haven't. Okay. And that's something you need to start to rectify and do that better. But you still have that network is out there for you. You just haven't taken advantage of it. And your network is not just about work. Your network is your friend network, your family network that you need to leverage. So I don't care if you're reaching out to people on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, through TikTok, whatever social media platforms you might be involved with, you can leverage a lot of those connections to maybe help you get into a new opportunity. Okay. And of course, LinkedIn is the supreme area for network. I was an early adopter of LinkedIn when they started. I am a huge believer in the power of networking. And, look, I'm a complete extrovert, okay? Although as I've gotten older, I do like my quiet time as well, but I don't think anybody that knows me would ever call me an introvert. However, I also know a lot of people that have been introverts their whole life, and I've been able to coach them about leveraging LinkedIn to help build their networks. So to any of you right now that you're on LinkedIn, number one, you need to take whatever you have in your resume, you need to build out your LinkedIn profile and put everything in there. You need to build out that profile. And we'll do more about LinkedIn as we go on too. But really make sure that LinkedIn is not a place that, when you're writing in, the employer that you're currently or you were last working for, don't write in what the company does, and that's your statement about your work there. You need to bullet out in LinkedIn what you did for that company. You can put in like one sentence of, worked for ABC company that did blah, 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 blah. My responsibilities were, here's all the things that I did. And you make certain bullet points. Do not write multiple paragraphs either on your resume or on LinkedIn, because people do not want to read paragraphs, right? Large, 5, 6, 7 sentence paragraphs. They do not want to see that. They want to see this and then bullets, okay? But go and look at the places you've worked. Go and look up people. I don't care if you look up people from high school, if you look up people from college, if you look at people that, you were friends with growing up when you were 10 years old and you haven't thought about them in 20 years or 30 years. And now you're like, gee, I wonder what Jane Doe is doing these days. I haven't thought, I thought about her, but I don't know where look her up, try and find her. Maybe that becomes someone that's a good networking person for you. I have leveraged in my career my networks going back to the sleepaway camp that I went to from 1970 to 1974 to 1973 for 4 straight summers when I was 8 to 12 years old. And I have networked with those people on LinkedIn. I shit you not, right? This is the God's honest truth. So you have a bigger network than you realize. So go out, reach out to people, make them a part of your LinkedIn network. Use your social media all the other social media outlets to share with people, I'm looking for a new opportunity. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm really good at. And anybody that might have any leads, I would be so grateful for your assistance or your acknowledgement and sharing, any thoughts you may have. That is the best way to find jobs versus, again, being one of 100, 500, 1,000 resumes or more that employers are having to sort through, or relying on AI to sort through it for you. Because let me tell you, most applicant tracking systems that companies use to bring in all their applicants, the majority of them out there are not good at sorting through and basically raising the best people to the top. They're not there yet. Will it get there someday with AI? Maybe, but they are really not there yet. Maybe there's 2 or 3 systems out there that are doing it better than others, but it ain't great yet. So that's a lot of what I wanted to share with you today. I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope that you will take away some really good, tidbits that you can start to really grab onto and start to leverage. So what I'd really like to ask you to do is, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback or you have specific topics that you'd like me to cover for you, please email me at feedback@working-thepodcast.com. That again is feedback@working-thepodcast.com. And, right now, as I'm growing the podcast, I'm pretty much just doing this on my own. So if it takes a little while for me to get back to you, I will apologize in advance because I'm doing it by myself. But I will do my very level best to respond to everybody and follow up on, some of your requests that you have of topics for me to cover. And as I said, I'm going to have more guests on, and we'll be talking about a whole bunch of topics, going deeper into some of the things that we talked about today. But I wanted to get this out there because I know it's such a hard job market today. I know there's so many people out there that have been looking for jobs for a long time. I just interviewed someone the other day that's been looking for a job for like 16 months. And when I was out of, as I told you earlier, I was out of a job once for like 10 months time with 3 small kids at home, a mortgage, it's really hard. And my heart goes out to anybody that's struggling. And I truly want to be somebody that can bring to you a lot of information and a lot of guidance. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do very soon is offer people an opportunity for me to do kind of a live career makeover. So if you're somebody that's looking to transition careers, you've been in one kind of job and you're just not happy and you feel that you'd be better suited for something else, we can go through that whole process and do that as a live career makeover. So I will get there. And so I really appreciate all of you that are listening and viewing the podcast so far. Again, please let me know if I'm hitting on the things that you really want to learn about. I want to be your guide. I want to be that person that will tell you the truth and be very authentic in doing it. And that's what I want this podcast to be all about. So until next time, I wish you all the very best. And I thank you again for watching or listening. And please like the podcast so that we can continue to get more eyeballs, and I can bring you a lot more, in-depth guidance and coaching as we move forward. So thank you all again, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. You all take care now. Thank you. Bye-bye.